Well, hello, Madcappers. About 2 years ago, you made one of our videos, the Winter Toque, one of our most watched videos. And since I have slightly changed this pattern since then, I thought it was time for an update on one of the favorites on the channel. So today I'm going to show you once again how to make the Winter Toque, but how to build on it and make it a little bit fancier than a winter toque might be just on its own. It's a great hat though. There's nothing wrong with making the winter toque. Stopping there, don't worry about the contrast band, the pin. I'm going to show you how to do those things at the end of the video, but we'll first make the toque, and if you want to stop there, hey, no hurt feelings, that's great. But what I want you to do is to grab a copy of the free download, because I'm giving you both pattern pieces. I want your hats to turn out perfect. So just take a moment. You don't have to sign in. You don't have to go through checkout. There'll be a link in the video description for the pattern pieces. I'm giving you the average woman's size head as well as the average men's size head. I'm going to just give you a quick bit of advice. We have made this pattern so that you can print it in A4 or on letter size paper. It'll turn out the same. But what you need to do is just check these lines, and the line will be on the first page of the pattern set, which is 12 pages in total. So if you're in North America, check your inches. If you're in Europe and even in Canada and you're younger than me, check your centimeters. So the line will be there, and we want you to print this out at the custom size of 100% in your printer settings or on actual size in your printer settings. This is a PDF, so make sure that you have a PDF reader installed on your computer. And hey, now that that's out of the way, let's get started. Grab a copy of the free PDF and sew along with me. Let's make some toques. And at the end, I'm going to show you all sorts of different ways that you can trim your hat. So we'll go from simple winter toque with a deep cuff that you can wear turned up or down. You can make it baggy if you want to increase the depth because you have lots of hair, or if you want to leave off the top and make it into a really lovely, warm, thick headband, you can do that too. And then at the end, I'll show you how to trim it just to make it a little bit more special. All right, let's get started. Let's make some winter toques. So once you've printed out the pattern, you'll notice that it's 12 pages, and we have made that 3 rows of 4 pages each. So you're going to match the circles going across or horizontally, and vertically you're going to match the diamonds. And basically though, really the most important thing is to match the lines of the pattern. So you've checked your measuring line on page 1 and you have that measurement perfectly. So that means your printer settings are perfect too. I'm going to show you a different way to do the back seam of your toque, and that gives you a nice seam all the way down, which sort of, I think, prevents the fleece from twisting. But I'll also show you how to do it the more traditional way, so that if you have a machine that maybe can't handle 4 layers or 5 layers of fleece, then this traditional way will probably work for you. And then towards the end of the video, we'll talk about the different ways you can trim your toque. I like to put my trim on as a pin, and this is also a video right now on the channel. I'll put a link in the description so that you can revisit that. That's a very easy and lovely pin to make. I will show you how to add a contrast band as well, also in fleece. I've done the little edge of my band with a slight serge, or actually we can just talk about trimming your hat with something that you buy at a store. So to start out, we're going to use a good quality polar fleece. This one has a stretch, an obvious stretch in one direction. I would stay away from the fleeces that stretch the same in all four directions. I think you want to have an obvious stretch in one direction and then along the grain, not so stretchy. So our pattern piece is going to be cut on the fold. So the actual body is going to be twice as wide as this one, and we're going to place it on the fold. And you can see there's a curved end on the sides, and that is your back seam, and the curves are the top of the hat. So we've got our right sides together, and this is the body. We're going to do that back seam in two different ways, one traditional and one with that way that we do it to save time and to make, I think, a better quality cuff that folds up nicely. And notice the top has a dart. We will match the ends of that dart at the center back along with the top of our seam on the body of the toque. But the dart will help give our top a curved shape. It takes some stress off of that seam when we join the top to the body, but it also just matches the gentle curve at the top of our heads. Our heads are not flat, and the best hats know that already. So we want to lift that hat a little bit off the top of our head, and that dart helps do that too. So the first step on the way that we do it here at Madcap is I'm just doing an edge stitch about 1/4 of an inch from the two raw edges using my magnetic seam guide, and I'm just sewing all the way down that back seam and sewing those two sides together, right sides together, and then I'm going to fold it up, and I'm matching those two curved ends together, and that's the top of our hat. And I've got 4 layers there, and I'm going to pin them matching that raw edge that actually is going to be the top of the cuff, where the top of the toque is going to be sewn on. And I'm going to use my regular seam width and do a 3/8 of an inch wide seam, or 1 centimeter all the way down. So now I've sewn 4 layers together on that side of the hat that has the curves at the top and bottom. And you can see it's folded in half. And I'm going to lift up that first layer of the hat, the layer that has right sides together on one side, and I'm just going to turn it right side out. And it's magic, folks. Now we have a lovely back seam that goes all the way down the cap, all sewn together nicely, preventing twisting and helping us when we are turning that cuff up to make a 4-layer hat when it's worn on our head. Now there's a bit of bulk there, so if you feel that your machine won't be able to handle that, we will show you the more traditional way of doing this back seam as well. But I'm just going to clip together, matching those raw edges all the way around, because I will do an edge stitch to join them. But first, let's do the more traditional way of sewing up that back seam. So I'm just starting at the top of one curve, and I'm using my 3/8 of an inch seam width, which is normal for me. So if I forget to mention that and it looks like I'm doing a normal seam width, it's 3/8 of an inch. I also forgot to mention that on the pattern pieces, you'll see a shadow around the black line. The black line has the 3/8 of an inch seam width built in. The shadow would be if you need a 1/2 an inch seam width. So I'm going to open up that seam that I just made, flatten it out, and I want to top stitch on each side of the seam, and I'll use my 1/4 inch foot with an edge. And I have a few of these, but I'll use this one because this one is similar to the foot that I have on my quilting or portable sewing machine, which many of you would have as well. So it's a foot that's readily available on the market. This one's on my industrial machine, but you can get it for the home portable machines as well. And I've just got that foot that pivots. It's on a spring and it's in the ditch there, and that is the foot that I have for my portable machine. That might look familiar to you if you have one too. It's a 1/4 inch. A lot of quilters would have that because that's the width of the seam we use when we're putting on the bias edging on our quilts. So I've got my seam open underneath, and I'm just going to sew on the right side and catch that raw edge underneath and open that seam flat underneath. So I go down one side and I pivot at the bottom and come back on the other. And that compensating foot is just resting in the ditch, in my stitch ditch, in my seam ditch. And there you can see it's flat and it's lovely and it's on the wrong side, but it'll be comfortable and it helps remove any bulk, which makes it easier for you to sew if you know already that your machine has a bit of a challenge sewing through multiple layers of thicker fabric. And then I'm going to just put the wrong sides together and match up those raw edges at the top and get ready to do an edge stitch and close up that seam all the way around. So I'm doing two at once because I'm also going to show you two different ways to do the top. But in the end, the hats will be looking the same, but you can see that long traditional way, it's open all the way down the seam, and this one, they're all sewn together, which I find just makes a sturdier toque with the cuff that's easier to turn up, and there's no twisting or rolling, and I find it's faster too. And of course, if you were going to do this for your business, you would do all these steps all at the same time on multiple hats. I'm just doing one at a time, so maybe it looks like it takes a long time to do it. I know this video is quite long, but that's because I'm going to show you all sorts of different techniques. And so now the top, we've got the right sides together. You can start on the inside of that dart and work down to the edge, or you can work from the edge up to the center of the top. You're just going to sort of wind your way off after you get past that dart, and I go past about 1 centimeter. Now we have two ways of just making that a nice finished dart on the inside of the hat, because I don't normally line the top. So one, I just serged along that dart on the outside edge and just finished off those raw edges. And then I've just flattened it on one side, and I'll just go up on one side with a top stitch. And my top stitch is about the width of my presser foot on that left side. And it's a nice clean finish. It looks nice on the inside too. If you don't have a serger, then I would suggest that you just open up that dart. So the wrong side underneath my presser foot is open underneath on each side. And I'm just going to go up one side of my seam and pivot at the top. And I've over sewed the seam edge, and I'll just come back down on the other side. And then you can clean up those bits of fabric if you'd like, just to make it look even neater on the inside. Just carefully with your scissors, careful not to cut through the seam or the top. And there we have it. We have two tops, and they'll both do the same thing, but they both look nice on the inside. One if you have a serger and one if you don't. So now I'm just going to get ready to put my top onto my hat body. And I'm just marking a center point by notching at the center front. Then I bring that center front notch back to that back seam and create a spot where I have center sides. And I'll put 2 more notches in, 1 on each side. So I have 4 notches on my hat body, and I'll match that with 4 notches on my top. So I'm just going to cut a center front notch. And then I'll bring that center front notch to the back seam and create a point on each side where I have a center side and cut a small notch. Just a small notch, big enough that you can see it when you're sewing. You don't want to make it deeper than your seam width, however. So matching up those center back seams on the top and on the hat body, I'll just pin them or clip them in place, and now I'm matching the center front notches, the center side notches, and at this point you should see whether your 2 pieces are going to fit correctly. Before this, though, I would suggest just trying on that hat body just to make sure that it's going to fit your head as well. All fleece is a little bit different. It's not all created equally, so some might be stretchier. You might need to make your hat a little smaller than my pattern, or some might not be as stretchy as mine, and you might need to cut your pattern piece a little bit larger. So I'm doing a 3/8 of an inch wide seam all the way around to join those two pieces together. And I'm using my magnetic seam guide on the right side to help me rest those raw edges and match them up. Now for this one, since this is the one I used my serger for the top, I'm just going to go around that top edge and serge it. So there it is there. Nicely cleaned up, nicely finished. And it really will help me with that last step that I'll show you in a minute. If you don't have a serger, just continue to do the same thing. Sew the two pieces together with your seam width. Mine's 3/8 of an inch. And now that I have a seam that's joined the top and the body together, I could stop here if I wanted to, but I really want to clean up that top and round off that sort of wobbly join there at the top and the sides. But by all means, you will be very happy with your hat, even if you just stop here. So what I'm going to do to help facilitate my step where I'm going to smooth out that top edge is I'm just going to do an edge stitch sewing all those 3 layers, the 2 layers from the hat body and the layer of the top together, close to the edge, but outside of the seam that joins them together. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn that and sew it to the side at the top, like a top stitch. And once again, I'll use that same foot. Now, this compensating foot has a spring in it, so make sure that yours does too. And there's this style as well. I like them both. I use them both. It's hard to pick a favorite, but because the metal one has a counterpart in my possession, at least, that works on a domestic sewing machine, I will use my metal one for the sake of this video. And these are the 1/4 inch wide compensating feet. And I'll put links below in the description for these presser feet. I got them all on Amazon, which makes it pretty easy to get them all around the world. They could be called a compensating foot, or it could be called a foot with an edge guide. I like the one that's 1/4 inch wide. That's what I'm using here. You can get them in metal, or you can get them with a Teflon coating. You can probably get them at your favorite quilting shop or fabric store as well. So I have all my seam edges pointing towards the left or towards the body part of my hat. So on my right side, I have 1 layer, which is the top. And on the left side, I am sewing through the top and the sides. And it works out to be, about 5 layers of fabric. And I'm just keeping that metal extended part of my foot that's on the right side there in the ditch. And it's making a really lovely job, giving me a very, very nice, clean finish. It sews down that side edge nicely on the inside, so you've got a comfortable hat at the top. And on the outside, it looks really, really lovely. And don't be afraid of these presser feet, folks. This is such a small investment in such an amazing difference in the quality of your finished work. These feet are usually less than $10. It's such a great investment. My edge guide foot for my portable sewing machine came in this box with this walking foot. And the walking foot is going to be very handy if you're working on a portable or a beginner level sewing machine and you have trouble with multiple layers of fabric. So keep that in mind. The walking foot is another great investment. All right, so let's say that you want to get this fancied up a little bit and you want to add a contrasting band of fabric. Now, we use black a lot here at Madcap Hats. I've had this hat in my line for years now. And if I use black as a contrasting band, then the flower will have the color of the hat body as well as that contrasting band in it, tying it all together. And since this piece is going around the hat, it's going to be cut in the stretchy direction as well. It's about 1.5 inches wide, And for me, this one's about 23.5 inches long, going around the head. But then I'm going to sew the two raw ends together to make a continuous loop. I've used my 3/8 of an inch seam width, and I'm just going to trim those two ends and cut off that corner, those pieces that are at the corner on the raw part of the seam on an angle, a 45-degree angle, just to make it easier to sew this piece onto my hat, and that I won't have any of the pieces of that raw edge underneath sticking out of my hat. Cleans up nicely that way. Now, your contrasting band is actually going to be sewn to the lower part of the inside of the cuff or of the hat body. Now, if you really want a baggy toque, you might not want to do this. I find that this is nice for the people that are going to turn that cuff up and enjoy the fact that they'd have 4 layers of fleece fabric covering their ears when the weather is really cold and nasty. And I place mine about 3/4 of an inch or 2 centimeters up from that bottom folded edge. And once again, it's placed on the inside of the hat. And then I'm just going to pin horizontally in the center of my trim through the layer of the hat body all the way around, just to hold it in place while I sew it in place. And you can see I just go around with my ruler and just check to make sure that they're about the same distance from that folded bottom edge. And then flip it over and do it on the other side as well. You can see that back seam, and I'm working now coming across the center front of the hat, or what will be the center front of the toque. Adjusting it as I go. And this is really nice when you make a pin to match, because you will combine the color of your contrasting band with the body color of your hat. And we have just sold so many of these types of toques over the years. I don't even know. It's got to be in the thousands. It's a lovely hat. Our customers really, really love it. And it's nice too, with this design, it fits really nicely under a coat hood as well. And this will give you an idea of what it's going to look like when it's all sewn together. So you're going to sew on the lower edge of that contrasting band and on the upper edge as well. And once again, we're going to use our compensating foot to do that job. And I'll stick with the metal one, again, because I have that metal piece for my Janome HD 1000 machine, which is a portable sewing machine. It's my backup spare. I know most of my viewers are probably using a machine that's more like my Janome HD 1000, a portable machine, rather than an industrial one. So I will try to use my Janome more going forward with the videos coming up in the future. And those 2 rows of sewing, the one on the lower edge of that band and the one on the upper edge, they don't really cause the hat to be restricted in fit at all. In fact, I think it adds a little bit to it. It just sort of tightens it up just slightly around your ears, which is nice. If you find that it's making your hat really, really too tight, you can try doing this step with a zigzag or an elastic stitch if your machine has that. But it should work fine for you as it does for me. Fingers crossed. And then again, on this gray hat, which is our best-selling hat, I did serge the edges of that contrasting band, but you don't have to. It's fleece. It won't fray. It's lovely. And now let's talk about how we're going to trim our hats. So I try to recycle all the little bits of scraps from cutting out my hats, for all my hats, whether they're like this toque or whether they have a brim. I do make lots of flower And I try to make them as pins so that they can be removed for cleaning. So whether you want to just do a solid color, if you want to do something fancy like we did a few years ago on the channel, and that video will be linked in the description, or you can just buy a pin. This one's beautiful. It's a little butterfly. It's got lots of sparkles to it. But again, it's a pin so that if you wanted to add that to a hat that you were going to sell or give to a friend, they could easily take the pin off if they want to clean the hat. And something like that just looks great on every color. So my pins, when I make them in the studio, they start with a disc of a stiffened felt, and you can buy those discs already pre-cut. You can get them on Amazon. They come in a box of 100. They're about 2 inches in diameter, or you can make your own. You can buy these sheets of stiffened felt as well. I can get them at Michael's or from Amazon, but I'll put links below in the description. And then I'm using a pin. You can buy safety pins just about anywhere. My pins are a little bit over 1 inch in length, or maybe close to 3 centimeters. I cut a rectangle of the stiffened felt. And if you just look at what I'm doing there, I put it facing the back of the pin, apply some hot glue, and I just let it sit. And now I have pin backs, and I usually make a bunch of them all at once, and I just keep them off to the side so they're ready to use. And then I usually layer 3 or 4 layers. I'll use buttons like this one, which is about 2 inches in diameter, and it sort of matches the fleece or the stiffened felt discs that I get for the pin back as well. And it's something simple as just buying a big button, a large big button that has 2 holes in it, threading a piece of fleece through like you would thread some yarn or some thread, tying that fleece into a knot and just twisting it so that it looks a little bit like a bow. And then you can just trim the ends to give it more of a bow-like feel. And that's easy peasy. Now, this started off as a coconut shell button, and I've spray painted a bunch of them black, so I keep those on hand too. As I said, I use black for my contrast for a lot of my winter hats. So it's good just to keep a theme, and black spray paint is so easy to find, and it does a great job. And then I'm just building up the back a little bit. I'll just add a little scrap of fleece just to help that pin back that's made of the stiffened felt have something to stick onto. And just like that, now I have a pin. And of course, at your favorite sewing store or craft store, you'll see all sorts of buttons. So this is a really easy thing that you can make, and just use a piece of your offcut of your fleece to do that little thread in the middle, make that little bow, and voila, you have trim. Now, I also have a Sizzix machine. I have a Big Shot. So I am using that along with my dies. And let me tell you, if you ever see one of these come up for sale on Marketplace or, anywhere that you see it coming up for sale, grab it, especially if it has these old dies that are flower shaped. I just love mine, and some of my dies are 12 years old now, and they are still sharp and they still work, and I've made thousands of flower pins with them. Probably one of the best investments I ever made. It always seems expensive at the time, but boy, oh boy, this has been a workhorse for me. So I'm just using different flower parts and layering. And it's nice, this machine cuts 2 pieces of fleece at a time. So I've got a 3-layer flower petal pin so far, or underway. And I'm mixing up my red and black together, just using scraps. And I have a scrap of little plaid fabric that picks up red and black, and it has some gray in it too. So I'll just cover a button. And this has a metal pin button back or loop back. So I've just pushed it flat, and I'll just again use my hot glue to finish it off, and then just add the backing. And once I make these pins, I let them set for about an hour before I actually put them on the hat. Probably don't need to let it set that long, but I'd just like to be sure. And so this gives you an idea of how nice this looks and how easy it was to make. And then if you had this hat for yourself, or if you were doing it for a client, they can take the pin off if they want to wash the hat, and the pin stays nice. And so it's just up to your imagination when you're cutting layers and making a flower pin, about what you can do, how you can mix fibers and fabrics. And on the next video about the toque, it won't be the next video on the channel, but soon, in this next few months, I'll do a video showing you how you can actually build that cuff of your hat with different types of fabric. So there's some ideas there. And of course, I make these flowers for all these hats now. And this is our bestseller, and it's just because of 2 tones of gray. It's lovely. You can make a bow and just cut down your pin back to match the back of the bow. There I've put some pieces of wool, and I used some of my fusible 2-sided interfacing to add some fleece to the back so it wouldn't fray. And of course, my round button. And this has a flower button shape. And again, I spray painted it black. So I hope I've given you lots of ideas, and in that next video, I'll show you how to insert a piece of faux fur to make this winter beanie toque so beautiful. I want to thank everyone for supporting this channel, but especially our channel members. Thank you so much, ladies. We couldn't do it without you. And of course, you can follow us on Facebook and Instagram. We're Madcap Hats. Please take a minute to like this video for the YouTube algorithm, and subscribe to the channel if you want to learn more about hat making. I'm Tori Capes. I'm a certified milliner. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you again soon. Bye.